If you are a distance runner, stop doing VO2 max workouts.
If I know my VO2 max, then I can measure it and improve it. And if I improve it, I'll be a better runner. That's what we assume. This is not true.
Now, you're probably gonna hate this, right? What do you mean? Don't you know that all of the great endurance athletes, they have high recorded VO2 maxes? Yes, I do know this. They also have high lactate thresholds. And I'm telling you that VO2 max and lactate threshold are not the things that limit your performance. Let's listen to a little story here that's gonna prove it for you. Now, two of the greatest endurance athletes to ever walk this planet. They both had very high VO2 maxes, and they both ran a marathon. But the difference in time was about an hour. So who are these athletes? Well, one of them is the world record holder in the marathon back in the early 2000s, Paul Tergat, multiple Olympian, world record holder. At the time, nobody had run faster in the marathon ever. His VO2 max was pretty good. But then Lance Armstrong retired from, competitive biking, and he decided to try a marathon. Now, whatever you think about Lance Armstrong's ethics or doping or anything like that, let's just put it aside for now, because the man truly trained at a very high level. He was on his bike about 6 hours per day. He knew what he was doing as an athlete, and he had a very high VO2 max. In fact, his VO2 max was just a little bit better than Paul Tergat's, the world record holder in the marathon. Not only that, but his lactate threshold was better than Paul Tergat's, the world record holder in the marathon. So on paper, Lance Armstrong is looking like he can run pretty quick. Well, when Lance Armstrong ran the New York City Marathon, he ran just under 3 hours. And that's not a bad time. But for someone who's one of the greatest endurance athletes to ever live, it's utter nonsense crap. So why was that? I thought he had a really great VO2 max. If you need further proof than that, well, I'm gonna give you a little bit more proof than that, but that story just illustrates it right there. So let's take a deeper dive into this. And then at the end of the video, I'm gonna share with you a raffle that we're doing right now. You got a couple more days to get in. It's completely free for you. It's really fun, so stick around. You can click the link below right now and just get your free entries, and we'll tell you more about it at the end of the video. Let's dive into it here. Let's go.
So VO2 max, what is it? We assume that it has something to do with our ability to transport oxygen, something with our aerobic capacity. And it makes sense, doesn't it, that if you improve your aerobic capacity, that you would improve your running. And so we just assume, we jump on the bandwagon that we should be focusing on VO2 max. But VO2 max is not what the general population thinks it is, which is like our capacity to take in air. That's not what it is. That would just be your lung capacity. But as you start exercising, the amount of oxygen that you do deliver to your working muscles is a level of VO2, and it's the volume at velocity of oxygen that you can deliver. So I'm going to chunk this down one more step. As you start walking, you breathe in a little bit more and you deliver more oxygen, hopefully, to your muscles. Otherwise, you keel over. And as the intensity level goes up, you might breathe in more and deliver even more oxygen. And then you go to a full sprint and you might breathe in as much as you can and deliver as much oxygen as you can. But you can go beyond that and you can run yourself until you fall over. But at some point, you can't deliver any more oxygen than what your body's capable of. And that plateau is called the VO2 max. And so VO2 max is really this. It's measured in ml/kg minutes. So ml, milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. Okay. So how much oxygen based off your body weight in a given amount of time. So it's how quickly you can distribute oxygen to your working muscles. That's what a VO2 max is. Not about how much you can breathe in, not about how much you breathe, how much you can actually utilize. So we're going to talk about why you might want to focus on this. But the first thing is, a lot of people know about VO2 max because of these watches, right? Garmin's, Coros, and they approximate your VO2 max for you. And I'll tell you that there's no way that a watch can tell you what your VO2 max is. I have been tested myself in the lab back in exercise physiology class in undergraduate school. And you have to get on the treadmill. To test your VO2 max, you need to be moving, and they do it normally on a treadmill or a bike. And it's a graded test where you go at a baseline and then you increase the incline, increase the incline, increase the incline, increase the incline, until you fall off. And you have either a harness attached to the ceiling or you have a spotter that keeps you from falling off. And at the point of fail, that's where you measure the oxygen exchange. Now you have to have a mask over your face too to do this. And you measure the oxygen going in and the CO2 coming out, and you have to calibrate the gases. So this is a process that's very finely tuned, literally calibrated before you start the treadmill. So your watch isn't doing any of that. You should not rely on this for VO2 max at all. You need to get tested if you want to know. But why would you even want to know? So let's go down even further. Why would you want to know what your VO2 max is? The assumption is that if I know my VO2 max, then I can measure it and improve it. And if I improve it, I'll be a better runner. That's what we assume. But this is not true. It's not true. I'm very sorry. It's not true even. It's true maybe a little bit, okay? But when you run a marathon, you're not running, something's getting maxed out, right? You run to the max and you can fall down and you give it everything you got. But if you measure your VO2 level at the point when you're really pushing, it's not at the VO2 max. You're below your VO2 max. You're at, depending who you are, how fast you are, you might be at something like 85% of your VO2 max. So that's interesting, isn't it? Now, if VO2 max were the thing that we should train to get better, it should be the thing that limits us, because you're bumping our head up against the ceiling of our performance and we want to push that ceiling up, right? But the ceiling of performance is here and VO2 max is just here. It's not even at the limit. We're not even maxed out. So marathons less than VO2 max, let's go to like a 2 mile or a 5K. So let's just make up something and say you run at 110% of your VO2 max in a 2 mile. Now that's really interesting. It also can't be what limits your 2 mile or your 5K. Because if it were, once again, you would hit 100% and then you would just ride that out until you burn out. So at no distance is the VO2 max maxed out. The race distance that hypothetically would just be at VO2 max would be a race that's about 12 minutes long, okay? And it just happens to be the right duration to be at your VO2 max. But still, VO2 max probably isn't what limits that race. We know it's not shorter for shorter distances, and we know it's not for longer distances. It's probably not for a 12-minute race too. All right, now why does training at VO2 max still work? I'm gonna tell you why it still works, what you can do instead to make it even better, and then what the benefits of high VO2 max are, okay? So why does VO2 max training still work? The reason is because it gives you a pace to train at that you normally don't train at. So we oftentimes run very easy, and then we sometimes run very fast. And even the average runner will do intervals one day and tempo run one day. Those are slow paces and fast paces. VO2 max is a pace that's kind of moderate. It's kind of in between. It's pretty fast, but it's not all out 400s, and it's not a half-hour tempo run. It's this pace that is often neglected. And for that reason, if you train at VO2 max pace, you're probably gonna be a better runner, because you're training you're training a muscle pace range that has been otherwise neglected. It's this pace that's kind of a no man's land otherwise. And when you hit that for a lot of volume, you're going to improve your fitness because you're getting more fit across the board. It just makes sense. Instead of training here and here, you train here and here, but also VO2 max and lactate threshold and race pace. And look at that, you've trained across the board and you're gonna get better. So VO2 max training does work, but not because it's increasing your VO2 max, because you're training a pace that would otherwise be neglected and you get a benefit from that. What we've talked about here is why VO2 max isn't the limiter of performance that we thought it was, but that probably leaves you thinking, well, what is the limiter of performance? And we have a bunch of videos that really dissect this very deeply for you, and we'll link them in the notes below. For example, this video here where we talk about the myth of junk miles, but why we think junk miles exist, and I'll show you how VO2 max kind of fits in there. You really want to watch this video. We'll also link for you the full webinar that we have. It's a 50-minute training that really breaks down how to apply this to your running, but I want to give you a little bit of the cliff notes here so that you're left knowing a little bit more about what to do. So let's take a look. With your training, you have a number of things that will limit your performance. And if we look at the things that actually limit your peak performance, they're gonna be, number one is gonna be your mindset. And our other videos go deep into this here, but I want you to see that if you don't actually do your training, if you don't feel motivated to do it long term, if you get hurt and you give up, if any of those things happen, if you don't decide to do the race, nothing matters. So mindset is really the ultimate limiter of performance. But below that, remember that running is a muscular event. So I'm just gonna call this muscles here, but this is really neuromuscular. So mindset is the ultimate limiter of performance, but running is a muscular event. Remember Lance Armstrong and Paul Tergat. Well, why did Paul Tergat run so much better than Lance Armstrong? It's because
They had the same VO2 max, the same lactate threshold, but Paul Tergat trained his muscles for running, whereas Lance Armstrong trained his muscles for biking. So the third area down is actually your metabolic systems. And this actually is things like your VO2 max. It actually is things like your lactate threshold. Things like that. This is your metabolic systems, basically turning fuel, taking fuel and combining it with the amazing organs that you have of your lungs, of your heart, and the metabolic processes going on in your cells. Basically all of this here, this all really does matter. You want to have good lungs, you want to have good heart, you want to have a good VO2 max. Of course you do, because they feed the muscles. So these are the things that actually limit your performance most. Now you might be wondering what this fourth one is underneath here, and this is actually your body composition. Body composition. Do you have a lot of fat? Do you have a lot of muscle? Are you 7 feet tall or are you 4 feet tall? You know, all these things really matter. Do you have one leg that's very long and one leg that's not? So these are the things that will limit your performance in this order. But I want you to see, I want to break down for you right here that VO2 max isn't a nothing input. It's just not nearly as important as training your muscles. So check this out. If we were to just focus here, just focus on the muscles, because this is really where we want to train, then what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. So within the training paces that you have, now this is a different hierarchy. These are just your training paces, okay? You have as fast can be. This would be like an all-out sprint, okay? And this would be as slow can be, maybe even a walk, all right? And you have every pace in between. So somewhere in there, let's change colors. Let's go with purple here, okay? Somewhere in here, you've got your VO2 max, and we'll put that here. This would be VO2 max. All right, you've also got things like lactate threshold that are going to be a little bit slower, and we'll call that lactate threshold. So VO2 max training does exist within a well-rounded muscular development, but it exists only as a small part that you can see here. And in fact, as you train the muscle fibers a little bit faster than it, let's call that here. And as you train the fibers a little bit slower than it here, but you train them at a higher level and they start to fatigue, they're gonna start to recruit the sum of the fibers around them. You see that? And it starts to just overlap, and you actually end up training at VO2 max pace anyway. Likewise, if you're running faster than VO2 max pace, but you start to accumulate volume, you're gonna fatigue up here really quick, but you're also gonna carry over and fatigue here. And look at that, you've actually filled in all of these muscle fibers. So you actually do wanna train across the board, every muscle fiber type, but we don't wanna focus just on VO2 max, because if you did, then what's happening is you're just training here. And we're neglecting all of this development here, and we really don't want to do that. So instead of training on focusing on VO2 max, we want to focus on specific paces that are going to feed your race performance. So here are the benefits of having a high VO2 max. Why would you want to have a high VO2 max? Now, if you look into research on the longevity, lifespan, and health span, so how long you live, but how long you live a healthy life, in fact, I believe it's the number one, according to Peter Attia, it's the number one correlate with your health span, and that is VO2 max. Now, why? VO2 max is a complex measure of a number of things going on in your body. It doesn't just mean we trained our heart and we trained our lungs to be a good runner. No. Having a high VO2 max means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got 7 things for you just off the top of my head before this call that I wrote down that it signifies. Okay. Number one, if you have a high VO2 max, it means that you're using that oxygen. So you have a high ability to use oxygen, which means you have a lot of mitochondria. You can't have a high VO2 max without having a lot of mitochondria. So number one, it means you got lots of mitochondria, and that's really, really good for your health.
for your longevity, for every metabolic system, for staying alive, and for running. So high VO2 max, it means you got a lot of mitochondria. That's good. It means that your diet is probably at least okay, if not better and better and better as your VO2 max goes up, because your VO2 max is dependent on how much you weigh. I can tell you how to improve your VO2 max by a couple of points instantaneously before the end of this call. You want to know how? Go ahead, type in the chat if you can imagine a way that you can increase your VO2 max before the end of this call without running. I'll give you a couple seconds. If you want to increase VO2 max instantaneously, what you need to do is get rid of some weight. What's the quickest way to get rid of some weight? Go use the bathroom. Use the bathroom, eliminate. Get rid of some weight, right? If it's the amount of oxygen you can use per kilogram of body weight per minute, we can't change how long a minute is. You're not going to change how much you can breathe in, but you can change how much you weigh. You could take your shoes off. You could use the bathroom. You could cut your hair, and your VO2 max literally went up. If we measured it on a treadmill, your VO2 max went up. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. So anyway, it means you have a high VO2 max, means you have a lot of mitochondria. It means that your diet and your BMI are within, you're handling it. Because if you had a lot of excess weight, you would have a lower VO2 max. Even if your heart and lungs could do the same thing, extra weight decreases your VO2 max. Okay. So it says something about your body fat percentage. That's pretty amazing. And it says something about the capacity of your lungs to even move. If you had one lung that was collapsed, your VO2 max is going to be lower. And it says something about your heart. Your heart is able to actually deliver blood, oxygenated blood, to your working muscles. So you have a healthy heart, an intact heart. But finally, what it means is that you have a good efficiency of movement. Now, don't just listen to these bullet points I'm saying. I want you to think about this. VO2 max is correlated with health and longevity. Why? Because if you have a high efficiency of movement, and so you use oxygen better, you've trained yourself, then what does it mean? It means you've moved a lot in your life. So if you've moved a lot in your life, if you've eaten foods that keep excess weight off, and if you have a lot of mitochondria from aerobic exercise, cold immersion, whatever it is, if you have all these things, it's not that the VO2 max created a healthier life. It's that the same thing that led to a VO2 max were the same habits that gave you health. So that's where it comes in to this phrase that you've heard before, that correlation does not equal causation. Blah, blah. We hear that a lot, don't we, in the science world? And it's so true. It's almost trivial and we almost forget about it. But in this case, VO2 max is correlated with your health and your lifespan, health span, and correlated with your running ability, but not causing your running ability. The things that caused the higher running ability are the same things that caused the VO2 max, like high level of training, consistency over years, low body fat, good diet. Those things led to a better performance and they led to a better VO2 max. But the VO2 max itself didn't lead to the better performance. Now, sure, it supports it. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. It supports it. Yes, of course. But mindset, what you decide to do is the ultimate limiter of your performance. Below that is the muscular system. You have to train the muscles. That's why Lance Armstrong did not run as fast as Paul Tergat. And then below that, we have VO2 max. We have the metabolic systems, which support your muscles. So it is important, but it's not what limits our performance. We're giving away so much stuff to you. Thank you for being a watcher. Thank you for being part of Run Elite. It's fun, but come here for a second. The coolest thing is that you're gonna have a chance to get a customized world-class biomechanic analysis of your running gait so that we can share with you how you can improve your running really quickly, the stretches, the strengthening, the exercises that you need to do. So if you wanna win these items, all you need to do is click the link below and enter our raffle. And thank you so much if you're one of our readers who's got the book and left us an awesome review. But if you haven't yet, go ahead and pick up your copy, Run Elite. It's on Amazon right now. It's on Audible right now. Train and think like the greatest runners of all time. And you're gonna learn three things basically. You're gonna learn the elite mindset, and then you're gonna learn how to structure your training every step of the way, including some bonuses, including a pace calculator for all your training paces. And then you have special hacks that the US military, the NBA, and the NFL are using to increase endurance in as little as
6 days. So go ahead and pick up a copy of the book. And thank you so much for being a member of our group here and watching our videos. If it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't have even made this. So take care, and thank you for making it a success.